Everybody.
Hello, everybody in Sekonic land. Today we have Alexis Cuarezma here, and we're going to talk about some of his work. How you doing, Alexis?
Doing great, man. Can't complain.
Awesome. And so for some of you guys who are new to Alexis's work, let's give him a brief introduction. He immigrated to the U.S. when he was only 6 years old from Nicaragua. After college, he began shooting major covers for Sports Illustrated, Ring Magazine, and Undisputed Fight Magazine, TV Guide, People Magazine, and the LA Times. He's also began taking on clients such as Nike, HBO, and many more. In this chat, we're going to discuss his in-your-face style. We're going to walk you through some of his more iconic shoots, and we're going to learn about his lighting techniques and throw him a few zinger questions as well. So Alexis, how are you doing today?
Doing great, man. Excited to be here.
Awesome, man. We are excited to have you. I want to jump right in and talk about one of your shoots that I think really shows off your iconic style really, really well. And also for you guys out there, we're going to preview Alexis's new website as well as we go through this process.
Yeah, so there it is.
Here, this shoot here that all of you guys saw in our advertising, the Jordan brand shoot, these are some amazing images. I love, you were able to capture it from so many different angles. I mean, this here, I mean, this is just beautiful. And I love like the push and pull between like the cool and the warm. Loving this angle here, showing him kind of jumping up towards the basketball rim. And then another one where his chest is more open to the rim. I mean, these are really beautiful shots. And I love the way that you use lighting, you use atmosphere, really to transform the space and really keep the focus on our subject here. Can you tell us a little bit more about this shoot as I continue to scroll through some of the images?
Yeah, well, that shoot took a lot of preparation in planning, or at least prepping in the gym, because obviously it looks nothing like that. All the light there that I created was actually a strobe. So it's pretty much 100% lit by strobes in the interior. If the strobes didn't go off, the only thing you would see probably up there is that window. So the first thing I did when I got into that gym was I started running the hazer. The hazer had to be run for like 2 to 3 hours so it could fill up the entire gym because it's huge. And then I brought in powerful lights. And actually, when I was getting ready for this shoot, funny enough, I was talking with my gaffer, Siraj, who works at the rental house. It was amazing. And then I was pulling all the gear out, and he was telling me, he knew what I was doing, and he recommended I use the high rollers, those light stands.
Yeah.
And he's the one who told me, hey, man, you should take 4 Profoto 10A packs and then the twin heads. And I was like, nah, man. I was like, I think I'll be fine with just, one on each side. And anyhow, when I go to set up, I took only 2. And I put them up, and I started to meter the light, and I'm like, damn, he's right. I should have took 4 packs instead of 2. So it would have given me an extra stop, and I would have been able to overpower those windows a little bit. Because when for a shoot like that, I like to anyone that doesn't know a lot about lighting, the inverse square law, I like to simplify it pretty much, which is it pretty means the closer you are to the light source, the more fall off there will be. The further you are away from the light source, the less fall off there will be. So when you're trying to illuminate something large like a basketball rim, just like that shot, the side one, the light that's coming from the rim has to be far away from the rim. So you're gonna have a lot of light fall off. So there's no way around it. You're gonna need a lot of power. Because even if you have, like, let's say if you were to mount a weaker flash right by the rim, you're gonna have a lot of fall off. So the rim's gonna be like nuclear white, so you could get a decent exposure on him. So for the exposure to be kind of more even throughout, the light has to be far away. So for a shoot like this, you kind of got to prepare and use a lot of power and have the lights far away, and there's going to be a lot of light loss. So not only throwing in that too, throwing in gelling the other light. Whenever you gel a light, what gels technically do is they don't color the light, they remove light. So the light, when it bursts, it has like all the color spectrum. So that's why it looks daylight or white. And when you're coloring it and you're tinting it, you're removing certain, light rays to get that color. So that's essentially cut on light. So you could lose a stop of light or even multiple stops of light when you gel it.
No, thanks for sharing. So one question I had, when you're working with an athlete like that, and obviously that's a very athletic shoot, what type of things do you need to do in order to make sure they don't get tired out?
Communication all the time. So I am whenever I do a shoot with an athlete,
Mhm.
I I communicate with them what I want, and I learned this from I did martial arts a long time ago when I was
Ah.
like 7 years old to like 13 years old for 7 years.
Mhm.
And one of the things I learned from a photographer that shot like martial arts um, is when we're trying to get a photo done, like you don't got to do like the technique perfect to execute like the kick, right? You could keep the leg straight and just like slide it up. It'll look really good because all you see is the final product. You don't see, you don't see the whole extension. So with athletes, sometimes I do that, to save their energy and save their, their knees if they got to do a lot of jumping and everything. So that's one thing that I do with athletes. If they got to punch like hard, you could make them do it 50%, and they could kind of fake it and it'll still look good on the photograph. If you have an athlete that's awesome and could give you 100% blast and 100% full power, I've done that before too. That's great. But when it's like a professional athlete, some of them are not going to give you a lot of reps, and they're going to be done right away. So I tend to stay away from that. I try to be as efficient as possible, and get it done quick. With that being said, that shoot was a couple hours.
How many times did he have to dunk for this one?
He dunked a lot of times because we did a bunch of different shoots, so and kind of different outfits too. So this shoot, I want to say we shot for an entire day. I think maybe 6 hours or so. We did like other portrait stuff too, as well. And on that one, he did a number of different dunks. He did it. I want to say probably at least 20 dunks or so.
Oh, nice.
30, yeah. And sometimes he had to, yeah, that's from DTC. Oh, I see the questions that come up right. That's with DTC lighting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice. That's what's up. And explain to me kind of a lot of your work. One of the common threads is kind of this warm and cool. What's your thought process behind it? When I was looking at this shoot, it almost seemed as if though like let me share some of the images again.
Yeah, hold them up on screen, Ab. Let me just quickly swap out batteries real fast on this
No,
mic.
no worries, no worries.
Yeah.
But as you guys see, as we're looking at some of these images here, I really love like the way Alexis kind of deals with like this push and pull, where if we look here where we have the athlete coming out of the hallway, and the cool thing here is like, how interesting is a hallway with just brick walls? By using what looks like probably one light and some haze, it really, really adds the fact that it's almost like this basketball player is like a hero. And like the warm light, Alexis, I was wondering, it almost looks like he's walking into the fire, and the warm light is like lower, and he's going somewhere holding this ball, it's a court. And when he gets out there, you have like this very angelic light kind of coming up from above, almost kind of like a heaven and hell type of thing to some extent.
Yeah.
And I just want to hear you talk more about your process in terms of using gels. Like when you're using gels, where do you decide where the cool gel is going to go? And then where do you decide where the warm gel is going to go? In these pictures, it almost looks like the warm gel is his opponent to a certain degree, back here. And then here is just this beautiful angelic, like cool gel. What's your thought process between the warm and the cool?
Generally, I like to put the warm light on my talent or my subject, and I like to make the environment cool with light. But I had another photographer. Her name is Alyssa. She assisted me on the shoot that I did. We'll talk later on with Marina Jacobi, Miss Nicaragua, and she asked me about my use of color and lighting. Where I get my inspiration from, and I really had to think about that. And I think what it comes down to is me being original from Latin America and growing up in a Hispanic household that's raised Catholic, and my mom having up, religious, like pictures up all over the place. I think that left an impression on me as a kid, and I think subconsciously that's where I get part of my my inspiration for lighting, just from seeing so many images like that as a child. Like it was just embedded into me.
Yeah. And when I heard you talk earlier, where you were, it's very interesting when you're looking at a shot like this. A lot of people may not realize that you do need so much difference, so much distance, I mean, between the light and the rim, so that by the time the light hits your subject, the rim just isn't this blown out thing. Did you use a meter to kind of help you dial that in so you could understand how the light was falling off?
I did. I use a meter all the time when crucial storms like that, especially too. That's when I knew when I metered the light. That's when I knew I was like, damn. I was like, I should have listened to Siraj and brought those extra 2 packs in those twin heads. Because generally, I like to be at f16, ISO 100, because that knocks out all the ambient light, and you don't got to worry about that, and it's 100% lit by you. On that shoot, I want to say I think I was ISO 13, and I think like f13, and I want to say ISO I think maybe like 200 or 400. And those extra packs would have given me an extra stop to bring down those windows and doing that. But yeah, like light loss is something that you're always fighting when you modify the light, when you cut it, when you gel it. Even you got to fight through the haze as well too. The haze, because this disperses the light a little bit, so you're losing light even there too as well.
Got it. Cool. No, again, okay.
Sorry, I mean, but another good reason to have why I like haze and a light meter is if you get, you could measure academically and repeat it over and over again, the level of haziness that you like. So for example, a thing you could do is just leave like a par light or any light that's continuous, and you could meter it with no haze, and then you could start the haze up, right, in the entire room, and then you could meter again, and the difference, whatever the difference is, with a stop, a half stop, and you see it visually what you like, then you know how much haze you need to fill up the room with, because you know how much light got dispersed and lost. So that's a way to measure, to know how much haze that you like in a room.
I never thought of that. And I just recently, often inspired by your work, I started using like more haze.
Yeah.
And I never thought in terms of like using a light meter to also help you understand how thick the haze is by determining light loss.
Yeah, because all you need is a continuous light. Anything could work as long as it's just consistent, and you have it there, and then that's how you know you have enough haze to your liking.
Awesome. No, thank you, man. And again, we really love this Jordan brand shoot. Do we have any questions about the shoot that we just looked at, of this athlete in the gym dunking?
There's nothing right now. There's only one. Do you use DTC lighting in Emeryville? Yes,
they're awesome. That shoot was from, I got all that stuff from DTC, and the gaffer who I work with on other projects, he works at DTC too as well, and he helped me pick up the order, and he's the one that suggested I take the 4 packs instead of 2. But yeah, they're amazing. They're one of my favorite lighting companies here in the Bay Area.
Nice. So the next shoot I want to talk about really talks about how prepared you need to be when you're walking into some of these situations. We're going to talk about the shoot you did with Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. And I can only imagine it was unbelievably stressful having to deal with a shoot in which, I mean, let me shut up and ask you, I mean, how much time did you have to deal with these athletes?
Both of those I had only under a minute with each of them. So whenever we get back to the regular world and get to do talks and I do presentations, I actually get to show the entire shoot from beginning to end, because it's really short. So I show those in my presentation, the behind the scenes of those. But yeah, they're really short, and you have a lot of people around you. For Pacquiao, the portraits were done during that same day I shot Floyd, when they were shooting the commercial for their fight. And then the gym shoots were done on another day when he was doing another fight. That's on during the media day, and those were for another client. But the portrait shoots were, yeah, it's just something where you got to be prepared. The thing that helps you out a lot with that, well, number one is knowing what you want to do. But thankfully, athlete of that caliber, they have stand-ins. So the stand-in is the same height and same skin tone as they are. So you could get time with the stand-in that you need and dial in the lights and get in everything ready to go, and that helps. That just takes so much pressure off of you. But with that being said, when from those shoots, that's generally why I shoot, I would say 90% of my work is with this lens. This is my favorite lens. This is the Canon 24-105 f4 lens. It's not a sexy lens at all, but if you look at those pictures with this lens, it lets you go from 24 to 105 just that fast. You don't need to switch around or anything like that. And a lot of times, like I said, I'm either at f11 or f16. At that point, our lenses are created equal. So if I use primes, that would just be it would just be more of a deterrent, like, because it would create no benefit. So at that point, the zoom's a lot more efficient. You could go 24 to 105 in 1 second like that, and it lets you be more efficient and get a wide shot and a tight shot. And that's something that I always get in the habit of doing now, because I even if an athlete tells you you're going to have, they could tell you're going to have 3 minutes with an athlete, and they could walk out after 5. So you always got to be prepared for that. And that's how I go into every shoot now. Every shoot I do with an athlete, I pretend it's a 30-second shoot, and I get my tie shot, my 3/4 shot. If they're cool with that, then I go on to my next phase, which I pretend is like a 2-minute shoot, and then 3 minutes, and then usually the max is 10 minutes. And then and so I have my little cycle that I go through, and then just prepare to, like, knock certain shots out that I know are marketable and sellable.
So besides having the stand-ins, like what else do you do to prep? So when the athlete gets there, you're like 100% ready. Do you test your lights off-site and then bring them on-site and kind of replicate the lighting that you want? Do you do it all that day? Like, what's that day like?
Well, I never ever do something high pressure like that I haven't done before. I do stuff even on test shoots. I practice for practice. So if I'm setting up a test shoot with somebody, like if you were an athlete that I wanted to work with, and I'm saying, we're going to try this. I've never done this before, and I'm going to do this lighting, this like that. Even though it's just a test shoot between you and I, and it's not paid or nothing like that, I would still practice on my own at home, because I don't want to waste that opportunity with you. You know what I mean? Because if I'm going to spend that time with you, I want to get something out of it that I like. So I even practice for practice. So in that shoot, that's a setup I've done over and over, like in my sleep, and I know it works really well. And like I do stuff that I'm extremely familiar with in those high pressure situations. You don't want to be testing or trying out new things. I mean, some photographers or some people do that. More power to them. If you have the guts to do that, but in a situation like that where you have to deliver under pressure, it's just like, and you don't have a lot of time and you only get one chance. I like to go for something that I know I could do, I know I could execute, and I know it works.
And how do you direct the athletes on that day? Like, what's their demeanor when they approach? Like, how do you quickly get rapport, or is it so much like business as usual? They just kind of walk, stand, and then walk off. Like, what's the interaction?
It's I would say it is challenging to shoot someone, for a short amount of time. But the flip side to that is they've been photographed all their lives, so some of them are extremely good in front of the camera. Like when I did the shoot with LeBron, like he knew what to do. Like it's like, wow. I'm like, it was like photographing a professional model. And besides doing that, I always try to talk to him a little bit beforehand. Like with Floyd, it was like I had a lot of things in my favor. The producer from that shoot introduced me to Floyd. I was like, he told him Derek Barbanti, which I thank every time I give a shout out when I talk about the shoot. He introduced me to Floyd. I was like, hey Floyd, I want to introduce you to one of the best photographers that I know. And and he introduced me to Floyd, and he took a picture with us, and I got to talk to him a little bit. And the thing that I spoke with him with Floyd about, which was another, again, just something stacked in my favor, just by luck, is he did an interview with I forget the guy who always wears the suspenders. I forget it, but he did an interview with that dude. He asked him, who would you fight if you could fight anybody in the history of boxing? And Floyd answered, Alexis Cuarezma. And that's what I'm named after. And I have a tattoo of him on my side. He's from Nicaragua. So that's what I spoke to Floyd about for the little time that we had to speak about. So I had something that I could somewhat relate to him, and talk with him a little bit. So the introduction with the producer that introduced me, and then talking like that with them, it's little things like that could just help you a little bit to connect with the person as much as you can.
And I guess he automatically knows you love boxing if you have a tattoo of a boxer.
Yeah.
On your arm. So he really understands more who you are.
So those are things that I always try to do. And but again, with some athletes, like I said, they're just really, really good, and they know what to do in front of the camera, and they're athletic. You know, just like you're only as good as the talent you photograph. You know, any photographer or director, you know, worth anything knows that. So you know, they're there for a reason. You know what I mean? Just Floyd in himself, one of my favorite photos is literally that photo of Floyd just standing straight up there, like doing nothing. He's not even posed, because he's just such a physical specimen. You know, he has insane abs, he's ripped. And I remember just seeing him in person, being across with him. Like literally, he inspired me to take my my fitness and nutrition seriously. I lost 30 pounds after this shoot, because I was so inspired by Floyd. Because I mean, I'm around professional athletes all the time, but they're like, you know, like 8 feet tall, and you feel like they're like, you know, oh, they're up there, and I'm just here. And Floyd is like my same height, if not shorter. And I remember thinking how lean he looked, how strong he looked, how muscular he looked. And I'm like, wow. And I'm like, you know, this isn't a bodybuilding contest, but I'm like, it's Floyd Mayweather you're talking about. He's one of the most, you know, skilled boxers in the world. And he just looked insanely muscular, strong, and ripped. And that just inspired me so much to, you know, change up my, you know, myself, my nutrition, and I lost 30 pounds for that. So it's like, you know, and that photo in itself, like it's just him standing there, and him being alone, that helps the photograph in itself.
Nice. And what direction do you give like your assistants and your crew on a shoot like that, especially when it's so high pressure?
Well, on that shoot, I was doing like triple duty for HBO. I was shooting unit photography, pretty much was called. So when they were filming the commercial, I had to shoot, you know, kind of reportage images of that. And then a creative director that I saw there wanted me to also like get video too as well of that. And then I got those portraits in as well, like that. So when you typically, I did have an assistant there. I just help me bring in the lights, and that's it. I generally, for something like that, it's just a 2-light setup. And for the sake of efficiency, when it's something that simple, I know it so well, I like to do it on my own.
Oh, so you set the lighting and everything up yourself?
Yep.
Oh,
the
nice.
assistant just helped me, you know, carry everything and bring it in, and I'm just like, I just bring it in and set it up, because I know, like I said, I know that setup to a T, and I like to set it up.
Nice. Did it throw you off at all that they were much shorter than, let's say, basketball players you worked with previously, or it kind of didn't make a difference?
No, I didn't, because I covered a lot of boxing, and I know a lot of boxers are different heights all over the time, so it didn't throw me off at all.
Awesome.
The only thing that's different about that shoot was like on that one, like there's like 20 people around you that follow them all the time, so it's kind of kind of entertaining seeing that, when you see just one person walk, and then like a group of like 20 people following them around, like in the whole area. And you just got to get, I'm used to it. That shoot was one of the with Floyd, I would say that's the shoot I've been most nervous ever in my life. And I got through it, thankfully. It went well. Sports Illustrated ran those images too. And after that shoot, I just stopped getting nervous for public speaking and everything. And so I'm thankful for that. You know, one of my favorite quotes is "Smooth seas never made for a skilled sailor."
Nice.
And that shoot was just like extremely nerve-wracking. And I was really extremely nervous. And I got through it. And then thankfully after that, I stopped getting nervous for some reason for public speaking and shoots.
Awesome. That's good. Did anyone have do you have any questions on this shoot? We take a quick look at the chat.
Let's see.
We do have some questions. Some of these we can address. Oh, there's one. What's limitations? Or Matt, did you have any picked out? Matt is our voice of God, who's also in this with us. He's our producer on the shoot.
Sure. Yes, there was let's say there's a lot of interesting questions here. I'm going to start with the last one that was submitted. How do you handle outdoor shoots in terms of lighting when you have less control of the environment? And that's from Norman.
That's a great question. That one takes a lot of planning, shooting. I love shooting in the studio because you control everything. And what I love shooting about environmentals or outside is that since you can't control everything, you could get a blessing in disguise that could be better than anything you had planned or anything that you could conceive inside a studio. So what I mean by that is, you know, it could rain on that day, which sounds like it would suck, but like it could stop raining and then they could just wet the entire pavement and give your image a visual element that's amazing. Or you could get some dramatic clouds that you could be absolutely blessed with, that you could never, you know, that would be extremely difficult or expensive to replicate in the studio. So what I do is a lot of planning for that, and I have a plan A, B, C, and D, and everything with that. The shoot I did with Vanessa Joy, we were planning on shooting outside, and I just constantly kept checking the weather forecast for that shoot. It went from being sunny to being rainy to going back and forth, and it ended up not raining at all. We had some beautiful clouds and blue skies that weren't that blue. You know, I was stacking filters, polarizers, and everything for that shoot, and it's just preparing. I use an app called Sunseeker, and if you could go out to your location and scout it out the day before, it gives you an idea of the path of the sun. So what I'll generally do is I'll have two game plans. I'll have a game plan if it's a clear day and the sun's never gonna, you know, get blocked by clouds, and then I'll have a plan B where if it's cloudy the entire day, and you could take advantage of that too as well. And then also for the outdoor shoots, what I'll do too is I'll plan depending how I want the sky to look. I'll plan to be my shoot direction to be 90 degrees from the sun if I want to use a polarizer and enhance the sky. If I want to backlight with the sun, then that doesn't matter. I'll use something else. But to even for planning for outdoor shoots, it's really, really fun because that's when I use a plethora of different filters that I use for a lot of these lenses, and I'll stack filters up. And when you're outdoors, you could do a lot of stuff. You could use a polarizer, you could use diffusion filters. I use 85 correction filters. So what those filters do is they're orange filters, and if you counter that white balance on your camera, it'll block blue light. So it'll help you drop down just the blue exposure, and you could do all kinds of stuff like that. Or so this is the number of different filters that I use for Tiffin filters. So wow. All those are things that you could plan for when you're outside that you can't really that are pretty useless inside, you know, because you could control everything inside, with the exception of diffusion filters. So that's how you know, the original questions, how I handle outdoor shoots and stuff like that. And the other thing with outdoor shoots is depending on how remote the outdoor shoot that it is, and the manpower that I have and the budget, that's going to affect the lighting. Because if you got to go to somewhere extremely remote, you can only take so much. You know what I mean? It wouldn't make sense to take out power generators and 10A packs. So that might limit you to, you know, B1s or whatever you could carry. You know, if there's only you and the talent, you're going to have to consider that. Okay, could I haul X amount of equipment? You know what I mean? Could I get, you know, 2 or 3 assistants who carry extra stuff? So I take that into consideration too as well. And then the role I wanted the sky to play in. Even with, you know, the ballet shoot, I shoot with film, black and white. I exclusively shoot T-Max film with this. I wanted to do a exterior black and white shot with one of the dancers, and I wanted really dramatic skies, because all the stuff I've done with the dancers so far has been indoors or in studios. And so for that, the way I would plan that is, you know, to use a red filter on the black and white film to make the sky completely black and have the clouds be dramatic, and doing that. So I take all that into consideration when doing the shoot. A lot of the stuff I plan. And then on the day of the shoot, you got to be mobile and flexible. So if something happens, you can't be too precious about your game plan. You got to be able to turn left or turn right, and be able to go with the flow and figure things out on the spot.
Cool. So how do you plan
that question?
Oh, no. How do you plan your lighting on location? Mm-hmm. And how many filters do you use at one time on the actual camera? You know,
I've used up to 4 filters. I've stacked up to 4 filters before in front of the lens and the camera. And the lighting, I planned it to, depending on how dramatic I want. I like to say there's 3 different types of lighting that I do. I either light for darkness, I flood with lighting, or I enhance the available lights that's there. So generally, if I want to light for darkness, lighting for darkness requires you to have like f16 or f22 because you got to knock out either all the ambient, and if you're outside, you're gonna have to knock out the sun depending on your time of day. And
not to interrupt, is there a picture that I could show to go along with that? I'm on your website now.
Yeah, the Vanessa Joy shoot, actually. Because that's an exterior one. So the carbon 38 when you go there. So on that one, if you go, so for the one for the sky's purple, on any of those, yeah, that one. So on that one, planning the lighting and everything, I had to test everything out, meter for everything for the light loss, because that's the shoot where I had like 5 filters or 4 filters stuck in front of the camera. I had 2 graded color filters. I had a Pro Mist filter to help diffuse the highlights. And I believe I also had a polarizer on this one too as well, to make the sky even more dramatic. So that gives you an insane amount of light loss. And so to plan the lighting for that, my lights had to be firing off. I forgot what the settings were, but I want to say probably around I had to be around like F30 or so, like that was my exposure for lights. So I had to double up 2 B1s on each side, and each of them had to have a magnum reflector, so they could have enough power, because they also needed to be overcorrected with gels, because I didn't want the light to have the same color as the filters in front of the filter in front of the camera. So if that makes sense, because that blue sky or that purplish sky that you see a graded for purple to kind of like a brown color, those are the color filters in front of the lens. So I didn't want that. If the light was not gelled at all, the light on her will also be purplish. And I wanted to have color contrast, a color difference between the lighting and her off the background. So I had to overcorrect those the lighting on the strobes, the color in the strobes. And all that took a ton of testing, pre-planning beforehand, and getting it right.
So a question that begs to be asked, and it's a little bit of a challenge, and is why not do some of that in post?
I like to get because I value clarity over options. In short, is the option. Like a lot of people act as if options are a luxury or something of value. I like to say the more options you have, it's you could just drown in opportunity. Like if I know what I want and I know the results that I do in it, just get it right in camera, and then you have to do less in post. You know what I mean? There's no reason to have a million different the only reason you would need all these options or doing it in post is if you have a client that's paying you and they might want to take control away from you. You know what I mean? But if you could bake everything inside in camera, I've always thought that way. Like I approach all my shoots as if I'm shooting 8x10 chrome. So I try to get everything in camera as much as I can. That makes sense. And yeah, you could definitely do that in post, but I don't know. I just always have or find magic in getting it right in camera. It just, for me, feels better. And again, that goes back to knowing what you want to do. If you have clarity again on your idea on how you want to light the person and doing it, you get it done. I like to do it in camera, and to me, that's more luxurious than having a million different options. Because like for example, with gels, some people get really confused or lost with gels because there's so many options out there, right? There's hundreds, if not thousands, of gels, right? And if you had a library with 1,000 gels, you could be stuck all day, trying to pick one out. But if okay, cool, I want to turn daylight, into tungsten, to get a CTO gel, right? If you prefer, yellowish tint, to get a CTS instead of a CTO, which will give you a more magenta. And that just you just got to be informed and know what you want. And then once you have that clarity, okay, I need this filter, I need this, I could stack them up, I could put them together, and it'll give me this result.
Have you found that clients appreciate that, being able to see exactly what they're going to get right when they're on set? Yeah,
that helps me out a lot, because it's I've had athletes or clients go, oh wow, that like, when did you Photoshop that? And it's like, no, it's not Photoshop. It's like it's done in camera. So that's always it feels like you're doing like a house party trick or like a magic trick or something like that when you see it, because they're so used, I guess, to seeing different results in when you're tethered, when you show them the results, and it looks nothing like it does to the eye, because the camera only sees when the flashes pop. It's night and day on what you're showing versus what you're seeing.
Cool. And so another thing I realized is it's always really healthy, you know, in my mind, when I see a photographer and their personal work mirrors the work they also get hired for in terms of execution, lighting, and overall aesthetic. And jumping back to your website, when I look at the projects that you do as personal projects, I know we discussed that this area up here at the top, Destined for Greatness, in which you photographed a lot of key dancers. It really follows suit with the work that of all the athletes that you show prior. What do you think ultimately like drives your aesthetic? And ultimately, what do you think about that concept? You know, do you think everyone's personal work should look exactly like their commercial work?
I would say it depends on what kind of commercial paid work you do, and what you're getting hired for. Like some people have longtime clients, and I always say show the work you want to get hired for. And I always like to say shoot for the jobs you want, not the ones you're getting. And I want to get hired to do work like this. So this is 100% personal work. And this is how my work looks when I don't have to answer to anyone but myself. So I like to say the reason my work looks like it does is because I put my flaws directly into my work. So this is 100% me and my flaws because you know, anyone that talks with me or that knows me knows my mind's all over the place. I'm ADD. I like to do a million different things at once, and that falls into the shoot. I do like 7 different looks in one day. I shoot 8x10. I shoot 35mm black and white film. I'll shoot digital, and I'll film motion posters. I'll film, you know, short narratives, and again, that's like the ADD in me that I've always been like that since like a child. And I like that's why I say I put my flaws directly into all my work. Like I did that for like the Sports Illustrated shoot where I only had 1 minute with each player. My first cover shoot, and I tried to do 4 setups at once. That's me putting my flaws directly into my work. Trying to do that. That wasn't, that wasn't Sports Illustrated asked me to do that. That wasn't anyone. That was just me needing to try to get that out of my system and saying, okay, I'm only gonna have 1 minute with Clint Dempsey. I'd love to get 4 different looks, and let me just plan it out and put it all out there. And that's what drives me, putting my flaws directly into my work.
And do you think it helps you that you don't have to alter your style a lot when you go to start doing commercial work, that your clients have seen that you kind of already have this style represented in your personal work?
Yeah, it's great. But what the biggest thing I've learned over the time is that a lot of the stuff when there's client work or paid work, it's not about me. It's about the client that have needs, and sometimes you get hired to be an executioner or a technician, I should say, or a craftsman, I should say, and they just need something, X, Y, and Z with the white background, lit evenly head to toe at f11, so you can see all the clothes, and you execute that. You know what I mean? One of the I don't have this work up anywhere, but like I would say one of the shoots where I probably made the most money in a short amount of time was a client that called me up that just needed headshots done, and they're asking me, oh, how much for a headshot for this company. And I was like, well, I gotta do the post production, do this, the lighting. They're like, no, we don't need any post production. Like, you could just get a prime lens. We want to shot like at f2. What about the lighting? They were like, no, you could just take a flash, bounce it off the ceiling, and a reflector, and that's it. And I almost wanted to say, wow, why don't you just take the photographs? I mean, you're telling me how to do my job, right? And I bit my tongue. I didn't say anything, and I said, okay. I took the job. I did it, and I knocked out like a handful of headshots in like 30 minutes. And that's the most money I've probably ever made. And the client came back, emailed me, and said, like, "Wow, thank you so much. You're one of the few photographers we've hired that could actually did what we wanted to do." And that work's not up anywhere, but there's clients like that just need something like that. They know their aesthetic, they know what they want, and in those situations, I just understand that it's not about me, and I just gotta service the client and give them the best and give them what they need. With that being said, though, in other situations where if that could happen, like in an editorial shoot, or something like that, where you have access to someone that's really special or someone that you really want to photograph or is meaningful, I will go out of my way to try to do what I can to photograph them the way I want to, if it's at all possible.
Nice. No, that's I think that's really, really cool. And speaking of personal shoots, and when you and I were talking before, we talked about the shoot that was closest to you.
Yep.
And so here, there's a shoot you did of Miss Nicaragua. And I also think it's important to share possibly a little video clip with everyone as well. 1 minute. Where did I scroll past it?
Yep, it's on the bottom. So scroll down right there.
Oh, right here.
Yep.
So before we get into this, everybody, I want to share a little video that Alexis put together for this piece. And then, you know, our discussion is going to get like a little bit deeper into this personal work. And, you know, when looking at this, you know, understand that this work here is closest to like Alexis's heart. And here's a little video that kind of gives us an introduction to why that is. For those who aren't too familiar with the politics in Nicaragua. Let me make sure I have my buttons checked here, doing my homework. And bear with us on this if it's a little bit choppy, but I think it's very significant leading into our next discussion.
It's in the videos at the moment that I won, and I have no idea what it was going through my mind. I don't remember like those seconds, but after that, I was in shock. I would just say it to myself, like, I'm Miss Nicaragua, I'm Miss Nicaragua.
Señoras y señores, Marina Jacobi es Miss Nicaragua 2016.
I am very patriotic. I wanted to give a voice to the voiceless because our human rights are not being respected.
Queremos mostrarles fotografías como las que ustedes están viendo en este momento, pues Marina Jacobi, Miss Nicaragua 2016, asegura que ha encontrado esa forma artística de contar lo que está ocurriendo en Nicaragua. Y para ello, Jacobi posó para el lente del fotógrafo Alexis Cuarezma y juntos crearon una historia que se divide en 4 fotos.
That first photo shoot was a very special and important photo shoot for me because I did it to help my country. Even though I was not in Nicaragua anymore, I wanted the Nicaraguan people to know that I was still with them and that we're all together fighting for justice in my country.
So first, thanks for sharing. I think that's a really powerful piece. And, you know, I don't think people really understand some of what goes on in Central America. You know, in 1979, when things got overturned there were as many deaths in Nicaragua as U.S. troops that died in Vietnam, you know, and that's a very significant number. And, you know, switching back and starting to look at the work, I really want you to give the audience a bit of a tour of what was going through your mind as you were putting these images together.
The first thing with this project is that I originally had an idea to do it, and all those ideas had to be scrapped because I was working with Marina, and she is Miss Nicaragua 2016, and she still has a family in Nicaragua. So to give you an idea, this was 2018 when we did this shoot, and the current Miss Nicaragua at that time, her name is Adriana. She was in the Miss Universe. And there was a lot of political turmoil going on there from the government and human rights violations. And so she brought out a white dove, not this Miss Nicaragua, the current one at that time we did the shoot. And the government, like, you know, when they were doing all the pageantry, saw that as attack on the government. So what they did is they shut down her parents' business, and they also didn't air the Miss Universe. They didn't allow it to air in the country. To give you an idea how, you know, the politics are over there. So you really don't have really freedom of speech or can't complain, anything like that. So with that being said, when I was doing this project with Marina, I wanted to be a lot more direct with what I wanted to do, and working with her and being kind of forced to not be able to be direct. We had to figure out ways to be more abstract and indirect on what we had to say, which you know, it's something you have to do, but I don't like being so abstract, because when you start to abstract something, then people could interpret it their own way. And I'm not a creative that likes to do work that's open to interpretation. I like everything that I do to have its own meaning and put meaning behind it. So that was the beginning of that project. So all the ideas I had to be tossed out, and I had to rework them with Marina. We came up with 4 images originally to do them, and then we executed those. Each of those has a different look. And she also worked with a writer, with a poet from Nicaragua, and he wrote a poem for each of the images that we did, and they were all directly connected to, again, the human rights violations that were going on in Nicaragua. And I would say in the 14, 15 years I've been shooting, that has been the most, if not the only, meaningful and significant shoot I've ever done. Sadly, you know, I wish I could say I've done more work like this that's meaningful to me. But it was real personal, because that revolution you're talking about in '79, I was born in '83, and I migrated to the US in '89 because of the human violations of that socialist dictator that was there in the '80s. So that same dictator in the '80s is the one that was redoing again those human rights violations, you know, in 2018, in 2017, that where we did this project from. So it was nice to be able to speak out and do something and do a project like this, and for the media in Latin America to pick it up. La Prensa picked it up, which is one of the largest newspapers there, which was amazing. And again, it was picked up because I worked with Marina, you know, Jacoby, and she was a former Miss Nicaragua, and that's why it was picked up. But yeah, each of those images had an idea and, you know, the story behind it, and the different lighting setup that we did, and we went through each of them, and we're all planned out. I had a stylist, a hair and makeup artist, and an assistant, you know, two assistants actually in that shoot. So, and the stylist that I had in that shoot, if you want to talk about collaborating, was absolutely amazing. Her name was Allie Morgan. She's based in Los Angeles, and she knocked it out of the park. Every idea that I had, and I told her, I didn't even, after I told her the concept, I didn't even tell her my idea, because hers was already better than mine. So I was like, you know what, just keep a mouth shut and, you know, let you do your job, and you want people like that. So that one was great on that shoot.
And before we jump back into some of those images, and you can walk us through like some of your lighting and your thought process, and staying on the top of Nicaragua, did you have any personal anecdotes that you could share around you leaving? I remember there was a story you were talking about, but maybe it was your mother having to share a bed when you were born.
Yeah, man. I mean, it was the government took over in '79, and so my mom gave birth. But by the time I was born in '83, stuff was really rough in Nicaragua, and there's like no baby pictures of me, because there was like no film available. There was like nothing available in Nicaragua, and if you didn't, if you weren't for the government and you didn't support them, like, you couldn't shop at supermarkets. You know what I mean? You'd have to wait in line, you know, for you know, 2-3 hours in lines for a certain X amount of, you know, ounces of like rice and milk and all that stuff. So it's yeah, it's a really rough time. That's why every year on my birthday, I buy my mom flowers, because it's like, you know what I mean? She's the one that had to go through kind of hell and back to raise a child during that time. You know, I didn't, you know, as a kid, thankfully, you know, I don't remember any of that, unfortunately. And you know, that just, you know, motivates me, because at the end of the day, because of all of that stuff, I like to say that, you know, when clients say, oh, we need a problem solver, we're doing this and that, like, I like to say at the end of the day, look, if my problem is figuring out how to light something, or what lens to use, or how to meter stuff, or what gels to use, that's not a problem, that's a privilege. You know, if those are your problems that you're worrying about, you know, when people like are you know, getting have human rights violated all the time, can't speak up, or executed and all that stuff, or coming from really hardcore poverty, you know, you don't got to worry about where your next meal is coming from, or how to feed your kids. It's not a problem. To give you an idea, the reason why we left is my dad had two boys. He had myself, and I have an older brother that was born in '89. And what that government started to do was, if you had a child that was a boy, and they looked old enough to fight in the army, they would take him from your house. So it didn't matter if you were 11, 12, or whatever. If you looked old enough, they would literally they would take your child by force and make them fight the guerrilla warfare that was going on there in the '80s. So I just put myself in my father's situation. I can't believe the amount of stress he had to be going through, having 2 kids and then having the government, having to face a government that's doing that. How bleak does your future look? You have 2 boys and the government's doing this. And then he had to, to make the long story short, he ended up leaving in Nicaragua to the U.S. in about 87 to get political asylum here. And he got it, and it took him about 1.5 years to 2 years to raise enough money for a plane ticket for my brother and my mom and myself to fly over there. So like that, to me, that's that's stressful. That's an actual problem, not figuring out how to light something or not having a lens or a camera or a filter. Like you could work around that, and then you're just taking a picture or making a video. Like that's a privilege. You know what I mean? It's not a problem at all. And that's a mindset that I take on a lot of stuff. That's why I don't mind setting up 12 lights or doing test shots or doing anything, because think about it, that's really a blessing if you get to do what you love doing. Photography, to a certain extent, is a luxury. Art is it's expressive. It's a luxury, and and to a certain extent, good comes from all the bad. And from that dictator, one of the biggest pet peeves of mine is censorship and not being able to say what you want, because that's what a dictator and the communist governments do. They like to oppress you for you not to say anything. And I like to say that helps me in my work, because I like to express myself, and I'll do it at all. I don't want to say at all costs, because it's not what other people, like a soldier or someone that does at all costs. I do it. I just do as much work as I need to do to express myself visually, lighting how I want to light the image or what I want to do, and that helps out my work directly.
Oh, absolutely. How do you feel when you see people complaining about being very creatively challenged? Do you see them as like, well, wow, how can that really be a challenge? It's a privilege even to be creatively challenged, or do you also share that sentiment?
Well, we have, the thing with me, I don't think it's unique, but I know other people feel, I am extremely grateful, but at certain times I do feel a certain sense of remorse of why me? Why do I get all these opportunities? I'm like literally one of the least talented people ever. And I just take advantage of the opportunities that I have. There's a lot of like other kids that I remember vaguely seeing in Nicaragua when I was 6 that had really talent and could draw really well and all that stuff like that. And the only reason I've had any success is because I had opportunities. You could argue I've made the opportunities, but I'm here and I got access to certain things other people would never have access to. But creativity, it could be a challenge. We all get in a creative rut. But I would say if someone's having challenges with creativity, what helps me is having something to say. If you have something to say, that could just drive you really well to to want to express that and say it. It has to be something meaningful and something personal. That's why I think why they say that artists suffer or have to have something tragic, because I think when something happens, that it just makes it deeper and it just gives you a bigger drive when something tragic and bad happens, versus just living an okay, all happy life, which is nothing wrong with that. I'm not knocking anyone out. People could be really happy and really creative too as well. But on that aspect, I like to say my work's directly influenced by my background by Nicaragua. If you look at it, I got to visit it back. I went back to Nicaragua when I was 17. And I think my work's like a microcosm of how Nicaragua is. Like Nicaragua is tropically, naturally, extremely beautiful country. And you see like the people trying to live there, and it looks like humans shouldn't even be inhabiting that area because it's just so beautiful. And then you also meet people in Nicaragua and they're extremely nice, the nicest people you've met. But at the same token, you also have the opposite, which you have extreme human rights violations. You have extremely violent and brutal history, a dictatorship and oppression. So you kind of have those two opposites. And that takes over all my work, because I always have those two opposite things like that contrasting each other in my work, with visual contrast with light, visual contrast with color. And I think that all goes into my work and is representation of the history of Nicaragua.
Awesome. No, beautiful. And thanks for sharing. And, going back to the shoot, one of the images that is extremely iconic from this shoot is this one here.
Yeah, that's the one I also got.
What was your thought process behind this?
A lot of flack for this one too as well. So this image represents. So I had Marina Jacobi specifically to be an icon and be representative of Nicaragua. So she's there representing the country in Nicaragua. And the original concept for this one that I had was to have the hand to represent oppression and not letting people speak. Because one of the things the government was doing is that they were attacking journalists and they were shutting down newspapers. That's all. I mean, that's the first thing you do when you try to take over a company, is take over the media, the news, the news and all the presses. And so they censor a lot and they oppress people. So that's what this image is supposed to represent. The original idea that I had to do is I wanted the hand completely not abstract at all and have the symbols of that government there, but we couldn't do that. It had to be more abstract and representative. So we had to represent like the silencing and the darkness, that we just painted the hand completely black to represent that void and the darkness of being oppressed, not being able to speak your mind. And then we had our hair kind of messed up and everything like that. And I kind of put the rim light on there to try to represent some hope, since we were able to do that project and some people were able to succeed despite all those odds. And that was the whole thought process for this image of doing that. So the hand's supposed to represent the oppression and the government, everything going on in Nicaragua. And she's supposed to be representing the people of Nicaragua that are oppressed and quiet. Or not quiet, but silenced by force.
No, this is such a beautiful series of images.
Thank you, man.
And again, I really love the way that the lighting and the same aesthetic that you have in these personal projects carries through to a lot of your more professional work, or the work that you get hired to do. I think that's a real blessing to be able to carry that aesthetic throughout.
Yeah, thank you. And it's something, you always gotta try to fight for and champion. I'm the one always trying to bring up ideas for clients and see if they hear me out. Like, oh, how about, they always have something that they want this. And I always suggest, oh, how about we do this? Or we also do this, or we could try this.
Awesome.
You know what I mean? And you're always fighting, hopefully not the client, but what you're fighting is always like time and enough budget and being able to execute all those ideas. You know what I mean? So that's always something, a balancing act that you got to do.
Cool.
And
oh, sorry to cut you off. What were you saying?
I was gonna say, and especially too, if you're doing a client work and sometimes you have certain assets you got to deliver, like, oh, you have to do like, it has to work on the vertical, it has to work horizontal, it has to work this, that could just like really limit your creativity and how many things you want to do.
Awesome. And so now for a difficult question. I always have one of these that, I try to have you absolutely not be prepared for.
Awesome. I'm excited, man.
All right. Would you continue this project about Nicaragua, if it meant you could never go back to Nicaragua?
Yes, because I absolutely. Because I think I can't, with the human rights violations and everything going on, I can't stay quiet or not say anything and doing that. I mean, the only reason I wouldn't continue it is if I had an opportunity to go there and have the most I could do in ending the oppression. So, and that would be a whole different career choice though at that point. But absolutely, I would continue that project because it's again, I'm not all by staying quiet and being silenced like that. I would need to speak my mind and speak my voice. And I think as a creative, that's our duty to do, especially having this opportunity and having a platform where you could actually release it and not be oppressed. Which even then, those avenues are in question now because Facebook, it's that whole controversy of like, oh, you're allowed to run certain political ads on Facebook, or should they be taken down? I think it should not. No private entity should. I mean, a private entity could do whatever they want, but I think you should be able to run whatever you want because to me, that's a slippery slope when you start saying, oh, you can't say this about X, Y, and Z, or you can't run those certain ads because you should be able to say what needs to be said. Art should never be censored, regardless how crude or how crass it could be or how offensive it could be. I mean, that's the job of art, to make you uncomfortable and make you see things that are not necessarily always pretty.
Awesome. And so now, did we have any questions about that shoot, or any Alexis' personal work, before we jump into the lightning round of questions?
There were no questions specifically about the personal work.
Awesome. So we're gonna ask Alexis 3 questions, and then we're gonna get into questions from you guys sitting at home. And we're so grateful that you guys have stuck with us through this. We definitely want these interviews to be a little bit more and give back. We want to deal with some real issues, and also mix in some photography, and then mix in some questions I'm about to ask next to kind of get into Alexis's head as a photographer. And these are a little bit easier. So the first one is, 1 second. For the next year, you only get 1 lens to shoot with. What would it be?
This one, the 24-105.
I made that one. You answered it before. You threw me off.
I shoot 90. I mean, I use a ton of different lenses, but I would say this is my bread and butter work for commercial work. So the speed that I said, and it just helps you be really efficient. And another thing I'll say about lenses too, if you want a lens, because companies release new lenses all the time, and people think the new lenses are supposedly quote unquote better. I would say not necessarily. I would say if you want a lens, depending on what you're trying to do, get a lens that has a quote unquote real clinical look. That means that it's just like, it has no characteristics. Because if it's like that, then you could just add filters in front of it to give it character, or net it, or do anything you want. Rear net. I like rear netting lenses. And you could change the look of that lens. But if you have the luxury to, then you could go and buy vintage lenses and try a bunch of different things. But that's my bread and butter lens.
All right, that one's a little too easy for you. So the next one, you have the choice to use Photoshop or on-camera filters for the rest of your career. Which do you choose?
Oh, on-camera filters.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Huh. And why?
Because you can make a lot of stuff. You could get a lot of the look you want in camera. So and you could just shoot JPEG, and the JPEG has a lot of contrast in there. You could almost have almost per se a preset, and you're good. I mean, I already shoot as if I'm shooting Chrome anyhow. So I get I would just literally have to take it a little step further and say, oh, you can't, Photoshop that light stand or whatever out and doing that. So I'd be fine with that. Yeah.
Would you meter any differently?
Maybe, but not necessarily. I would just have to be, I treat the metering and everything I can do as if I'm shooting Chrome. Mm-hmm. And Chrome only has like a 1.5 stop latitude. Yep. So your light's got to be dialed in. So maybe I would tighten that up a little bit, but not necessarily. I've shot Chrome before, so I'd probably stay the same.
All right. And then last question, let me see if I can stump you with this one, then we'll go to our audience. For the next year, you have to give up A, music on set, B, your car, and I know you live in California, your favorite lens, which you mentioned above, or lights. So you have to choose between being able to play music on set, having a car, your lights, or your favorite lens. Which do you give up?
I would say probably my car, because you could take an Uber to your shoot or something like that, right? Or get a grip van. So that's that out of all those, that would be the easiest one to give up. Music, is that important? Yeah, because it sets the vibe and the tone for your set and everything like that for your talent. So literally, like whenever I have a shoot, I ask the talent what music they want to listen to. If they say, oh, whatever you want, this and that, I stick with everybody likes the Beatles and everybody likes music from Michael Jackson. So I generally play those two because you can't go wrong with those on set. So, but other than that, I let them pick whatever they want to get them in the mood.
And what's on your personal playlist?
Oh, everything. I go from that, the Beatles, Michael Jackson, to Nirvana, to Beastie Boys, to Marilyn Manson. I listen to everything. So my music taste is as sporadic as all the lighting setups that I do. So
nice. And now we're going to go to our voice of reason, Mr. Matt Hill, and let us know if we had any questions from the chat that people would like for us to answer?
Sure. I'm just going to pop in and say hello.
Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, hello,
How you
hello.
doing?
Hello, Matt.
How you doing? So I've got spike tape on my finger. I cut myself. So here I am. So Malaysian1 said, you're a rare photographer that uses extensive uplighting. How did you develop that taste for uplighting, and what does it do for your style?
That's a good question. I thought about that because I think someone else asked me that. And I think that developed from me shooting boxing. When I first started shooting boxing, it was because I would go to the media days and I brought strobes because boxing gyms have horrible lighting. And that's a blessing in disguise, because if they have horrible lighting, you could bring your own lighting and make it look however you want. So the boxing ring is usually up maybe 4 feet or so. So I would put a strobe, really high, hard light, and then I would put a softbox. And then the softbox would be level with me. But since they're up on the rim, it would kind of uplight them a little bit. And I just started shooting that way, and I liked how it looked, and kind of was able to finesse it to where I really liked it. So that's initially where I started doing that. And that developed into just kind of doing it more on purpose and with intent.
Nice. Sam Raj asked this. Can you tell me about how you learned about color contrast?
Well, in college, I studied art, graphic design, and photography too as well. And in art class is what I learned the most, everything about art history and everything like that. And you study paintings, and you study color and color theory in graphic design. So that's that good foundation that I got. And I would say that the biggest lesson that I got was from a real deep professor I had in college. It was in my drawing 1 class. And I barely passed that class. He gave me a C-, which I actually love drawing. And I was drawing since I was little. But the main concept that I got from that class and that professor was he asked the class what you use your eyes for. And everybody's like, to see. He's like, no, you don't. And then he kept asking, and no one said the right question, and no one had the right answer for it. And then he finally told us, he said, you use your eyes for 2 things. He goes, you use them to recognize and to discriminate. And once you learn how to use your eyes, you could become a better creative, a better artist. And his example was, if I told you right now to draw a photograph of your mom, could you do it? Or draw a picture of your mom. And nobody raised their hand. And he goes, that's because you don't know what she looks like. You could recognize her and you could discriminate her from other people, but you don't know what she looks like, right? And if I tell you to draw something that's complex as like a hand or a foot, could you do that? And he goes, no, you can't, because you don't know what a hand or a foot looks like, but you could recognize one. So he goes, once you start learning that concept, it just helps you see better, if that makes sense, and understand things better. And I kind of took that to heart, and I just have a different eye of seeing things when it comes to lighting and color and things of that nature.
Oh, thank you for those. That was an elegant response. Appreciate it. So Malaysian also asked, I've seen your double setup, one for client expectations and one for you. Can you explain how you do that?
Yeah, I actually have I have a BTS video on my YouTube channel where it breaks down the whole thing. But essentially, that was the very first shoot I did for Sports Illustrated, where they wanted one specific look, and I wanted to light it with the warm, cool look that I have. And the shot list that I had was extensive, and I didn't want to waste any time doing stuff I wanted to do with the talent in case they would just walk off set. I needed to get everything that the client needed. So I was really frustrated because I was felt like backed into a corner. I'm like, if I shoot this, I know it will be a tear sheet for SI, but if it doesn't have the look that I want it to have, I won't really be proud of it. So I had to figure out a way where I could give them what they wanted and shoot what I want. So I did extra homework on that one, and there was nothing that I could find that I've seen someone do before online. And what I knew though before the other photographers did it is that they used Pocket Wizard and they used the speed cycler feature, so they could machine gun, at 10 frames a second, using 5 different power packs and fire them off back to back. And I remember seeing that and studying that and looking at that, and I'm like, okay, cool, it works like that. And I'm like, each of those power packs that are firing in succession, I told myself they don't necessarily need to be the same look. In theory, each of those could be a completely different look, and the person could be static. So from there I did the testing, and I did it, and I figured it out, and it worked, and you could actually do it, pull it off, and do different looks in a burst like that.
Oh, that's genius. That's awesome. I just posted a link to your YouTube channel a little while ago in the live chat, so people can go find that video in there.
Oh, awesome.
Rob Freeman asked this: what kind of light modifiers do you use?
Everything. I look, my favorite modifiers, depending on the light that I have, I tend to prefer, this is for a hard modifier. This is a Fresnel lens for the little light motion lights. I like a hard, punchy light. I like this one. And for my other favorite one I like is the Profoto Magnum reflector. This is like their OFC one. And the reason why I like this is because they give you like an extra stop or two of light. Both of these do in your lights. This is on the strobe and this is on the continuous lighting. The reason why I like a hard, punchy light is because I generally like my highlights to glimmer. And so for them to glimmer, they need to be about a stop or two stops overexposed. So that requires a lot of power. So for example, if you're metering the person and their light on there, that's a f11, I'm gonna want my rim lights 2 stops above that. So something like this that's efficient, that gives you a hard, punchy light and gives you extra stops. It helps you that way, you know what I mean? And the other thing why I like this too is because I always prefer a hard, punchy light, is because you could always bounce it. And once you bounce it and diffuse it as well, make a book light from it, it turns soft. So right now I'm being lit by a light bounce into a white bounce, and it's a punchy light if it would be right next to me. And those are my favorite modifiers. I would say these, anything that makes light hard. My main favorite one is what's called an optical zoom spot, or in the video world, it's called a Jolico. And what that is, it has a lens in it, and you can literally flag it or shape it any way you want, sharpen it or soften it. And that's my favorite one. It's a really hard, crisp light and looks beautiful. And I'll go from there. And then from this, like if I had that and these and grids to control the beam spread, I mean, that's all I need, because to make it soft, I would just shoot it through a scrim or a bounce or even a bed sheet. You don't need a softbox or octabox or anything like that. Those are the modifiers I tend to use. And if you want to get more into modifiers, or depending on what you consider a modifier, I use Roscoe diffusion gels. And those, they haven't, I mean, I'm using one right now for this light. So those modify the lights too, and they cut it, and you use flags and all that stuff. So I would say those, a hard one. I like grids to control the beam spread. It's all about controlling the light, and depending on the look that you want. And if I don't want something to look lit, I use something with a matte finish, like a V flat that has a matte finish, and those will give you the light output will be more subtle versus something that's specular. If you want it to look lit, you will use the silver side. If you don't want it to look lit, use a white matte, a white matte. So it just depends on the look that you're going for and the look that I come up with.
Beautiful.
Thanks for that. That's great. Ab, we have time for one more?
Absolutely. Last question.
All right. What limitations should those of us with only 400 watt-second strobes be aware of?
It's not really, that's a great question to think of, because rule of thumb, I like to say why I like a lot of power is because it lets you modify a light and bounce it and gel it and cut it. I would say if you only have a 400 watt-second light, that's still a pretty strong light. And they only have one light. Is that what they said that? Or they have...
just the limitation of only having 400 watt seconds maximum.
Oh, they have strobes. Okay, so I have more than one. Well, I would say number one, to indirectly answer this question, don't see something as limitation. Sometimes there's liberation in limitations, and it could be a blessing in disguise. Like I said, having a lot of options you could be drowned in opportunity. So if you have only 400 watt seconds, it could be a blessing in disguise. You would just need to know that you wouldn't necessarily be able to put lights super far away to have less light fall off, because at 400 watts, if you could only put one light, it's gonna your output is gonna be really low. But with that being said, you could put 3 of them on the triple header, and that gives you 3 times the power. I use a triple header with my B1s. You know, when I need 1,000 watt seconds, I'll put 2 of them on the triple header with strip boxes, and that gives you 1,000 watt seconds. So there's always something you could do to work around. And it's just that it's a workaround. It's not a replacement for a more powerful light, but you could do that. And then if it's a battery powered one, you just have to know the limitations of how, like with the B1s, I'm trying to think of what I think about. I generally don't run them at full power, so I could have more shots to fire, because the last thing I want to do is when I'm photographing someone is for the batteries to die and say, hold on, I gotta change the battery. So I'll generally run them at power 8 or 9. And I'll bump up the compromise says I'll bump up my ISO to like 400 instead of 100. But that's really almost no compromise these days, because the cameras are so good with the ISO. But that's only going to affect you if you're trying to knock out the ambient light, because you're bringing up all the ambient light by 2 stops. So that's something to be aware of. And if you got to cut it out, you're going to have to flag windows if it's affecting your end result. But other than that, 400 watts it's a decent light. You could definitely do a lot of things with that. I said, like, the only limitations that you would have with that is like you couldn't, if you're trying to light an entire arena, you're not going to get enough f-stop to have the lights really up high and far away to be able to do something that you could, like, let's say if you had a 2400 watt second pack, or like one of the old school Norman packs that are like huge. That just, or brute power, you know what I mean? So that's just one thing to think about, but it's really not necessarily a limitation if you have multiple of them, like what just sounds this person does to ask the question. I would say one of my favorite accessories is the triple header, and because you could mount multiple lights on one light stand, and then there you go, you got twice the power or 3 times the power. Or if you have enough lights up to 5, you could put up to 5 lights in one light stand, you know what I mean? And shoot all those through a scrim or however you're trying to do.
Cool. No, great answer. So Alexis, thank you so much. I think this was super informative.
Man, that was it, man. It went by quick.
That was fast. And that was almost an hour and a half.
Oh, wow. I didn't see that.
1 hour and 17 minutes. Yeah, time flies. You're having fun. And also really thank you for sharing, you know,
Yeah,
and
no,
including
course,
some like the personal anecdotes in this too, which I think it helps people to understand your work more when they really understand like where you're from. So yeah, thank you. We definitely have to have you back on, man, and we'll do it again.
Yeah, let me know whenever. That went by really fast, and I didn't realize it's been over an hour. But yeah, thank you, man. If we didn't get to your questions, sorry about that. Send me a DM on Instagram, and I'll be happy to answer it. And thank you very much for tuning in, and thank you for having me.
And what's your Instagram? And we'll put it down below in the description as well.
Yeah, everything is just Alexis Cuarezma. It's my first and last name.
Got it.
And that's my Instagram. And if you send me a DM, just say you tuned into it, it's a Sekonic one, and I'll be sure to answer it today.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
But everybody out there, thank you guys for tuning in. We really appreciate you. We hope you find value in these talks that we do. We definitely have more coming, so you definitely want to like and subscribe so that you know when we're going live with more information, and sign up to our email list as well. We usually let you guys know the morning of if we're going to go live. And again, like, subscribe, hit the bell. Please feel free to add any additional comments. I'm sure Alexis will pop in here and answer some of those questions for you. And we'll see you later. Have a great day.